You were never meant to hear this. Not in a sermon, not in a textbook, not even whispered behind the iron gates of an old stone convent. But here it is anyway. Unsealed like a crypt that should have stayed buried. 23 nuns disappeared from a single religious institution in less than a decade. Not one body, not one public investigation. Just names erased and souls discarded. The place was called St. Mary's, and it sat like a wound in the forested countryside of 1850s Wisconsin. To outsiders, it was a sanctuary, an orphanage, an infirmary, a spiritual retreat for devoted women. But inside, behind those pale limestone walls, something older than the church had taken root, and it fed on obedience. Records show these women were transferred to distant missions, but letters sent to them were returned unopened. Official diocesan documents were riddled with inconsistencies. In 1862, an internal memo quietly warned Rome, further inquiries may ignite scandal. So the church buried it. For over 160 years, these disappearances have lived only in whispers. Footnotes in restricted archives, pages torn from journals, and a handful of deathbed confessions from those who got too close. But recently, a sealed cavity was discovered behind a chapel wall during renovations. Inside, a cache of personal correspondence and inspection records that defy every official explanation the Church has offered. Tonight, we dig through what the Vatican never meant you to read. But be warned, this is not just a ghost story. This is a revelation of how institutions become machines. Machines that chew up innocence and spit out silence. This story is not about faith. It's about power cloaked in sanctity. The kind of power that convinces good women to disappear themselves. The kind of power that tells you the devil is outside, while hiding him in the pulpit. If you think you're prepared to understand what happened at St. Mary's, you're not. But if you feel that burn in your chest, the one that says something is wrong, the one that asks why did they vanish, then keep listening, because tonight we tear the veil. And what lies behind it will change the way you look at every cross, every prayer, and every kind face behind a collar. Forever. The year was 1854. Thick fog rolled over the black waters of Lake Michigan, swallowing trees, fields, and the old logging roads in a cold silence. A lone carriage creaked through the woods, bearing a bishop in black robes and a letter from Boston stamped with crimson wax. Authorization to consecrate a new convent on behalf of the church. The destination? A former lumber baron's mansion. Stone, 3 wings, 30 acres of dense forest. Purchased discreetly by the Diocese of Milwaukee. They called it St. Mary's Convent. But what they created was something else. A fortress. A place cut off from the world, where the rules of Rome were second only to the silent, punishing rituals enforced inside those walls. The original purpose was strategic, to expand Catholic influence in the Protestant-heavy territories of the American frontier, convert the settlers, take their orphans, heal their sick, and slowly, over generations, reshape the land in Rome's image. But the forest around St. Mary's had never been tamed, not by axe nor by prayer. Locals whispered about strange howls echoing through the pines at night. Children vanished from time to time. Old German settlers refused to go near the estate. They said the land was wrong, that even the birds avoided it. Still, the church pushed forward. At the head of the convent was Mother Catherine Murphy, a woman with icy blue eyes and a reputation for iron-fisted discipline cloaked in grace. She'd been transferred from a Boston institution, where several novices had mysteriously withdrawn after mental breakdowns. She brought with her 2 lieutenants, Sister Margaret Clark, a specialist in herbal medicine whose knowledge of tinctures and tonics bordered on alchemical, and Sister Elizabeth Foster, whose matronly warmth masked a keen administrative mind and an ability to manipulate records with surgical precision. Behind the daily life at St. Mary's was designed with surgical precision, not to nurture faith, but to erase identity. It began at 3 a.m. when the chapel bells shattered sleep like a hammer. Matins in the freezing dark, knees pressed to cold stone. Latin chants echoing through the cavernous halls, barely lit by candlelight. There was no warmth in those prayers, only rhythm, obedience, submission. After prayer, labor. The orphans had to be fed, the floors scrubbed, sick townsfolk treated in the infirmary, gardens tilled. Silence was the rule. Speaking, even whispering, without permission meant punishment. First small penances, then kneeling on dried peas for hours, then fasting, isolation, and eventually disappearance. By the end of 1854, the community was functioning like clockwork. To the outside world it was a triumph, an oasis of charity in the Wisconsin wilderness. But within its walls, something began to fester. Mother Catherine's leadership shifted from rigid to ruthless. She no longer corrected with scripture, but with humiliation. A nun caught breaking silence would be forced to confess her sins publicly, not just faults but thoughts, secrets, desires. These confessions were then used against them, carefully, methodically. Psychological leverage disguised as spiritual discipline. Sister Josephine, a quiet woman from Kilkenny, was found weeping after being denied communion for forgetting a single line of the Nicene Creed. She was made to kneel through the night without food, her rosary recited aloud over and over until her voice cracked. Sister Agnes, one of the youngest, was assigned to the laundry. She wrote in a letter to her cousin back in Dublin, "My hands are raw and bloodied from the cold water and lie, but they tell us suffering pleases the Lord. I only wonder if he sees us at all in this place." But not all suffering was visible. There. Summer came, but it brought no warmth to the hearts of the remaining sisters. The sun lit the convent grounds, but within the stone walls of St. Mary's, shadows only grew longer. Weeks passed. Then another disappearance. Sister Bernardet, kind, angel-voiced Bernardet, gone. No goodbyes, no witnesses, just another cold announcement over breakfast. She has been summoned to Chicago to assist at the new foundling home. The others nodded in silence, but their eyes? Terrified. The pattern had begun, and with it, a sickness no medicine could cure. Fear. It crept into their bones, into their prayers, into the way they walked, always quick, always cautious, eyes lowered. Every day became a test. Every sound, a warning. Then came Sister Teresa. She had been different, stronger than the rest, farm-bred, plain-faced, unafraid to speak. She whispered doubts in the garden, under the watchful gaze of the Virgin statue. "Too many are vanishing," she told Sister Mary, "and always the youngest, always the gentlest." Mary begged her to stay quiet. Teresa disappeared that night. No letter, no cloak, no trace. But a scrap of her prayer book was later found under Mary's mattress, its edge torn, its margin marked in a frantic scrawl. "If I vanish, tell Father Ryan." That was the moment it became clear. The transfers were a lie. No one was being sent to Chicago or Minnesota or anywhere at all. The nuns weren't being relocated. They were being taken. By whom? For what? It was Sister Mary who began to notice the details others missed. The way Mother Catherine's office light stayed on deep into the night. The strange men, finely dressed, smelling of cigars and wealth, who arrived under cover of darkness and left before dawn. And always, always after a disappearance. Then there was the north wing, locked, silent, supposedly condemned. But Mary had once seen movement there. If purity was the harvest, who was buying? Sister Mary couldn't sleep anymore, not because she feared being taken. No, that terror had matured into something colder, something sharper. She was no longer just afraid. She was watching, and she was planning. But the truth pressed down on her like the chapel's stone ceiling during midnight vigils. No one outside would believe her, not without proof, not in 1858, not in a church where obedience was worship and doubt was sin. Yet something inside her refused to bow, a voice that grew louder with each passing day. You are not crazy. You are not alone. You are not wrong. The next morning she risked everything. It was her day to collect eggs from the chicken coop, the only moment the nuns were allowed beyond the walls alone. As the milk boy approached the gate, Mary slipped a note into his pocket. Just 6 lines, hastily scrawled on the back of a psalm. Nuns disappearing, not transfers. Something evil here. Please send help. Sister Mary Collins. And then she pressed a small silver cross into his hand. Give this to Father Thomas, at St. Joseph's. The boy, all freckles and fear, nodded solemnly. He didn't speak, just ran. Inside, Mary felt the walls tighten. She had crossed a line, the kind you don't return from. But she had to know, was she mad, or was she the only sane one left? The following Sunday, Father Thomas arrived for Mass. His hands trembled as he passed out communion, his voice unsteady during the Eucharist. He saw the empty pews, the dwindling number of nuns, the hollow eyes of the remaining sisters. And when his gaze met Sister Mary's, she nodded, barely. Just once. The message was clear. You received it. Now act. But what could he do? Mother Catherine met him at the chapel doors afterward with her usual icy hospitality. We pray for your health, Father, and for your judgment. Father Thomas Ryan didn't sleep that night. He rode hard through the freezing Wisconsin wind, the snow biting into his skin like a warning from heaven itself. But it wasn't God who stirred unease in his heart. It was something older and far more human. The silver cross weighed like iron in his pocket. He arrived in Milwaukee the next day, disheveled and mud-streaked, at the residence of Bishop John Henney. The walls of the bishop's study were lined with fine books and warm fires, but the air inside was colder than the road that brought him. They spoke first of cathedral budgets, donations, the need for more Irish priests in Lutheran territory, all the safe words that kept the machinery turning. But then Father Ryan laid the cross on the bishop's table. Then he opened the note. The room changed. Bishop Henney read it once, then again, then carefully folded it and placed it aside like it was a report on livestock or building stone. These are serious accusations, Father, he said at last. His voice was calm, too calm. Mother Catherine has explained all transfers to my satisfaction. But Your Excellency, Ryan pleaded, 8 nuns have disappeared in 3 years. No one has seen them again. Their families write and receive no reply, and Sister Mary fears for her life. Henney sighed and poured himself a glass of claret. He didn't offer Ryan one. Young women are fragile, Father, emotional, prone to imagination. He said it like a priest reading liturgy. Mother Catherine's convent is thriving. Her support for our cathedral fund has been considerable. Let us not disrupt divine work with worldly paranoia. Ryan rose to speak again, but the bishop waved a jeweled hand. Focus on your parish. Leave convent matters to those appointed by God. Outside the bishop's residence, Ryan stood in the snow, fists clenched. He now understood. This went deeper than he thought. This wasn't just about a few missing nuns. It was about power. The kind that builds churches with silence, that buries truth beneath marble altars and calls it sacrifice. Inside St. Mary's, something profitable was happening, and too many men in collars were willing to keep it that way. But Father Ryan had seen the eyes of Sister Mary. He had seen what guilt looks like when it turns into courage. So he made a vow. If the church wouldn't protect her, he would, even if it cost him everything. The spring thaw came early in 1858, but it brought no warmth to St. Mary's. Inside its thick limestone walls, fear had hardened into something permanent. The remaining nuns moved like whispers, eyes downcast, breaths shallow, waiting to see whose name would be erased next. But they weren't waiting passively anymore. They were listening, watching, learning. Sister Mary Collins knew she had no protection, only time. And time, at St. Mary's, was always running out. So she began to write. Pages torn from discarded hymnals, hidden behind loose stones in the laundry wall, tucked under floorboards in the chapel. Each note detailed what she saw, what she heard, and what she suspected. Names, dates, punishments, whispered threats, and midnight footsteps that never returned. She called it her testimony, and it was more than paranoia, because she wasn't the only one watching. On Palm Sunday, Father Ryan returned to St. Mary's, under official orders, to collect diocesan financial records. His presence, though cordial on the surface, sent quiet ripples through the convent. Mother Catherine greeted him with her usual icy elegance. She smiled, but her eyes never did. "My, how the years have hardened you, Father," she said as she led him through the stone halls, past bowing sisters and closed doors. "You were barely more than a boy when we first met." Father Ryan said nothing, but his eyes caught everything. The infirmary had been expanded. The herb garden was now fully enclosed by brick, with no entry visible from the convent grounds. The orphanage had fewer children than he remembered, but seemed oddly better funded. New mattresses, brass fixtures, fresh linens, and always, always, the smell of something chemical beneath the incense. When he requested to see the ledgers, Mother Catherine produced them quickly, too quickly. The books were clean, orderly, and utterly unconvincing. Every transfer of a nun was noted in neat script, with dates and destinations. But Ryan noticed something odd. The ink on multiple entries was identical, fresh, as if written all at once. "Sister Teresa Donovan left for Montreal on January 12th, he said aloud. Mother Catherine nodded. Correct. She received a personal request from the Jesuit retreat director there. And yet this entry, he held up the ledger, was written with the same ink as the one for Sister Rebecca, who left in March. Her smile didn't waver. "Our records are updated quarterly, Father. Surely you understand how busy we are." Ryan said nothing, but inside, something turned. He knew forged order when he saw it. This wasn't chaos. This was curation. Father Ryan left St. Mary's with a rosary in his pocket and a fire in his chest. It was no longer a question of suspicion. It was proof. Not in a court of law, perhaps, but in the court of the soul. And something inside him whispered, "If you leave this alone, you are no better than the ones who disappeared them." He returned to St. Joseph's in silence, eyes scanning the passing trees for riders. In that part of Wisconsin, accidents happened easily, especially to priests who asked too many questions. That evening, in the solitude of his rectory, he reviewed Sister Mary's letter again. Something evil happens at St. Mary's. He stared at the last sentence. Please send help. But who could he trust? The bishop had been bought, or at least lulled by the soft power of donations and silence. The diocesan office would only bury the matter deeper. And the sheriff? A Protestant, yes, but a Mason too, and friendly with the clergy. He had no idea how deep this corruption went. So Father Ryan made the most dangerous choice of all. He went back, uninvited. By candlelight, He drafted an official-looking letter of ecclesiastical audit with the diocesan seal affixed, borrowed from a previous document, and rode through the fog-heavy dusk back to the convent the very next morning. No warning, no announcement. He arrived as the nuns filed out of lauds. The reaction was immediate. Mother Catherine stood frozen for a heartbeat too long before the veil of hospitality returned to her face. "Father," she said with theatrical calm, "what a surprise." He held up the envelope. "I've been authorized to collect and examine supplemental records, personnel assignments, medical logs, donations and correspondence from the last 5 years." Behind her, Sister Elizabeth paled. Mother Catherine's smile stiffened. "You are of course welcome, but we are quite busy preparing for whole. Shall week? Perhaps you would prefer—" "No," Ryan cut her off. His voice was colder than she expected. "I'll begin with the infirmary." She blinked, then nodded. 2 hours later, he found the first real crack. Behind a shelf of labeled tinctures in the locked infirmary cabinet, Ryan discovered an unmarked bottle of laudanum, a quantity far exceeding any legitimate need. More troubling, he found medical ledgers, showing repeated orders of chloroform and ether, not unusual for a hospital, unforgivable in a convent with no surgical facilities. He was copying entries into his journal when he heard it, a scraping from behind the wall, like stone on stone or metal. He rose, pressed his ear to the masonry. Silence. Then a soft thud, then a breath. Someone was in there. Father Ryan stepped back from the wall, his heart hammering like a cathedral bell struck in the dead of night. Someone, or something, had just moved on the other side of that stone. He tapped the wall again. No echo. Solid, but not dead solid. It felt hollow. Thin, even. As if a false panel had been dressed in stone, just deep enough to keep prying eyes blind. And his eyes? They weren't blind anymore. He glanced over his shoulder. The infirmary door still stood open. No sign of Sister Margaret. No sign of Mother Catherine. Yet. He ran his fingers across the mortar seams. No cracks, no latches. Just one unusually smooth ridge near the floor that didn't match the rest of the aged wall. He knelt, pushed. Nothing. He pushed again. Then twisted. Click. A hiss of stale air pushed outward as a narrow door-sized section of wall shifted back, revealing a stairwell descending into blackness. The air that met him wasn't just cold. It was wrong, tainted, like 1,000 whispered secrets left to rot in the dark. He stepped inside. Each stair groaned beneath his feet as he descended into the belly of St. Mary's. The walls narrowed, damp with condensation and old blood. Yes, he would swear it later. Not rust, not mildew. Blood. At the bottom was a corridor, narrow, cramped, lit only by a single oil lamp hanging by chain. And the smell. It hit him like a confession he didn't want to hear. Pine, alcohol, and beneath it, human decay. Subtle, but real. He moved forward, passing a series of doors. Heavy, reinforced, each with a small grated window at eye level. The first room held a cot and shackles. The second, straw bedding and what looked like old bloodstains on the stone. But it was the third room that stopped him cold. A girl. No. A nun. Emaciated, shackled, her habit torn, her eyes wide and terrified. She stared at him through the grate, lips trembling. "Please," she whispered, voice cracked like dry parchment. Please don't let them take me again." He fumbled for the latch. It was locked. She shrank back as heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor behind him. No time. He turned and froze. Mother Catherine stood at the top of the stairs. No veil, no warmth, only that pale blue gaze that seemed to slice right through the soul. "I warned them," she said calmly, descending one step at a time. "I told them you were clever, but I didn't think you'd come back so soon." Father Ryan reached for the rosary around his neck, not out of piety, but because the crucifix was sharp. Catherine smiled. "You think that little piece of silver will save you?" Behind her, Sister Margaret emerged, holding something, a syringe, filled with laudanum, or something worse. The last thing he heard before everything went black was the whispered voice of the girl behind the door. "They sell us, Father. They sell us to men who wear crosses, just like you." When Father Ryan awoke, his mouth was packed with linen. His wrists were bound behind his back with coarse rope, and a pounding ache split his skull like a cracked chalice. He lay on cold stone, the dampness seeping through his cassock, stinging his skin. The faint flicker of an oil lamp danced across the walls. Somewhere, water dripped with maddening rhythm, steady, precise, like the ticking of time running out. And above all, silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that waits. Footsteps approached, not hurried, measured. The gait of someone who had done this before, someone with practice. Mother Catherine appeared in the doorway. She held no lantern. She didn't need one. She moved through the shadows like she belonged to them. "You shouldn't have come back, Father," she said, her voice absent of malice, almost mournful. "But you had to play the martyr, always the martyr." She stepped closer, kneeling beside him. Her hand was cool and dry as it touched his cheek, like death dressed as mercy. "Did you really believe your little note would do anything? That Bishop Henny would defy the system that feeds him? You poor, sweet lamb." He mumbled through the gag, eyes wide with fury and fear. Catherine smiled. "You saw the girl, didn't you? That was Sister Maria. The 5th, or was it the 6th? I lose track now. They blur together after a while. But she's special. The clients pay more for fear. And she's so full of it." She stood and gestured to the far wall. There, nailed into the stone, hung a list, a roster, names. 23. Sister Agnes, Sister Bernardet, Sister Teresa. All marked with tiny crosses beside them, not of salvation, but of sale. "It started as a way to fund the mission," Catherine said, almost wistfully. "We needed resources, medicines, shelter. The church doesn't feed its own. Not really. And when the first offer came from Chicago, she trailed off. You can't imagine how easy it was. A girl disappears, the bishop gets his cathedral, the doctor gets his product, and we get peace." Sister Margaret entered, carrying a syringe. "No one asks questions about nuns," she said. "They're ghosts already." Father Ryan writhed, rage surging through him, but his body was still too weak. They knelt beside him, Catherine whispering scripture into his ear, Margaret injecting something thick and cold into his veins. Darkness returned. But before it took him, Catherine leaned close once more. "You should have left it buried, Father." And then, oblivion. Yet even in the black, one name echoed like a bell refusing silence. Sister Mary. Still free, still watching, still dangerous. When Father Ryan finally opened his eyes again, The world was blurred, fragmented, like a half-remembered nightmare refusing to fade. He was no longer in the cold stone chamber, but lying on a narrow cot in a small, dim room. His hands were free, but his legs trembled beneath him, weak from whatever poison had coursed through his veins. There was no time to rest. He had to find Sister Mary. She was the only hope left, a single thread unraveling the tangled web of St. Mary's horrors. Outside, the convent's ancient bell tolled faintly, marking the hours. But to Father Ryan, time had lost meaning. Every moment was a step deeper into darkness. He recalled the note she had slipped to the boy, Jimmy Fletcher. Words desperate and fragmented. Something evil happens at St. Mary's. Nuns disappearing. I fear for my life. But what exactly had she seen? And how much longer could she survive? In his weakened state, Ryan stumbled through the winding corridors, shadows pressing in from every corner. Doors sealed tight, whispers caught between stone walls. The convent was no longer a sanctuary. It was a prison disguised in black habits and prayers. He paused outside the infirmary. The door creaked open. Sister Margaret emerged, her eyes colder than the Wisconsin winter, face unreadable. "Father," she said smoothly, "you should not be wandering these halls." Ryan gripped the frame, searching her face for any sign of mercy. "You know what's happening here," he whispered. She smiled thinly. "What you think you know is a child's tale, Father. You cannot save those who are lost." Behind her, the faintest echo of muted sobbing drifted, a sound Ryan would never forget. It was Sister Mary, the last nun who dared question the darkness, the last one still fighting. Ryan's mind raced. He needed allies, but whom could he trust in a place where devotion masked cruelty and every shadow held a secret? The walls of St. Mary's had ears and eyes. They waited. For him, for Mary, for the truth, and for the reckoning. Now, before we go further, if you feel the pull of this dark secret, type the phrase, "Light reveals shadows," twice in the comments. This isn't just words. It's a key, a symbol of awakening, your first step into seeing what others refuse to. Brace yourself. The phrase, "Light reveals shadows," has been echoed by those who dare to see beyond the veil. Now, listen closely, for what follows will test your very grasp on reality. Father Ryan's pursuit of truth had placed him at the mercy of a force older and more insidious than he could have imagined. The convent's facade of sanctity masked a network of power, a shadow empire built on fear, control, and a chilling barter of flesh and faith. Mother Catherine's reign was no mere authoritarian rule. It was a calculated machinery of psychological domination. The punishments, the disappearances, the silence, they were not mistakes or unfortunate tragedies. They were deliberate acts of suppression, designed to crush dissent and maintain absolute obedience. Inside St. Mary's, the young nuns were pawns in a sinister trade. The well-dressed visitors, men cloaked in influence and greed, came not for blessings, but for something far darker. These transactions were whispered behind closed doors, hidden beneath layers of ritual and piety. Sister Mary's courage to resist had made her a threat, a flicker of light in a vault of shadows. The chilling cries Father Ryan heard the night Sister Rebecca vanished weren't just cries of pain. They were the desperate screams of those who understood too much. As Ryan pieced together the fragments, a horrifying picture emerged. St. Mary's was a nexus for trafficking under the guise of charity, a place where innocence was stolen and souls broken. The church's silence was deafening, not out of ignorance, but complicity. The local community's growing suspicion was met with denial, even hostility. To question the convent was to invite condemnation, to risk becoming an outsider in a society that demanded conformity and faith above all else. Father Ryan's own faith wavered as he realized the battle was not just against corrupt individuals, but against a system so entrenched it was protected by powerful hands far beyond Wisconsin's borders. But knowledge, once grasped, cannot be unlearned. It demands action. It demands sacrifice. And it changes a man forever. If you're still with me, type "Light reveals shadows" one more time. This is your commitment to see, to understand, and to awaken. The truth is darker than you can imagine, and we've only just begun to unravel it. Ready for the next step down the rabbit hole? Say yes. The silence that shrouded St. Mary's was not just the absence of sound. It was the suffocating weight of secrets too dark to bear. After that chilling night, when Sister Rebecca vanished, the convent began to twist into something unrecognizable. The walls that once echoed with prayer now hid screams, whispers, and shadowed deals. Father Ryan's investigation revealed the faint outlines of a terrifying reality. Beneath the holy robes and sacred vows lurked a trade fueled by corruption and an ancient hunger for power disguised in faith's clothing. The missing nuns were not lost to distant missions or illness. They were trafficked commodities in a sinister exchange. Their purity was a currency in a market ruled by men cloaked in privilege and impunity. The convent's increasing wealth, the donations from unseen patrons, the locked north wing where no light escaped, all pointed to a deliberate, well-oiled operation designed to prey on innocence. The Church's hierarchy turned a blind eye, their silence bought by promises and fear. The truth was locked behind layers of doctrine and intimidation. Within St. Mary's, fear became the currency. The young nuns lived under a constant threat, knowing that any misstep could mean disappearance or worse. Mother Catherine's iron grip tightened with each passing month, her pale blue eyes devoid of mercy as she wielded discipline like a weapon. The rituals of prayer became rituals of control, breaking spirits under the guise of devotion. Sister Mary's final act of defiance, sending the secret note, was a spark in this darkness, a desperate plea for salvation that would ignite a fire far beyond the convent's stone walls. But to expose such a secret meant facing a powerful enemy that thrived on silence and shadows. This story is not just about vanished nuns. It's about the machinery of control embedded deep in institutions that promise salvation while delivering suffering. It's about the dangerous intersection of faith, power, and corruption. You are witnessing the unraveling of a story buried for over a century, a story that challenges the very foundation of trust and belief. This is forbidden knowledge. Are you ready to see how deep this corruption runs? To meet the men who profited? To understand the full extent of the horror hidden behind the veil? Brace yourself. The next revelations will take you beyond fear, into a darkness most were never meant to enter. If you feel the weight of what you're learning, comment now. Light reveals shadows. Light reveals shadows. Let your voice join those awakening. The truth awaits. The name behind the curtain of darkness was Dr. Heinrich Voss, a man whose presence at St. Mary's had been whispered about but never openly acknowledged. A foreign physician with ties to shadowy elites, Voss was rumored to possess knowledge of human anatomy that went beyond healing, knowledge twisted into tools of control and exploitation. His visits to the convent coincided with the disappearances, each one leaving behind a chill deeper than winter's frost. Behind locked doors in the forbidden north wing, the line between medicine and monstrosity blurred. Sister Mary had heard hushed conversations, bargains struck over innocent bodies, rituals disguised as treatment. The nuns were not patients. They were victims. Voss's clientele were men of wealth and power, men who saw the convent as a source of purity and secrecy, a place where no questions dared be asked. The convent's growing fortune came from these dark transactions, funds funneled through coded donations, masked as pious offerings. Mother Catherine was no mere spiritual leader. She was a gatekeeper of this sinister commerce, her iron will ensuring the silence of those too frightened to speak. Yet beneath this facade of control, cracks were forming. Sister Mary's courage grew with each passing day. Fueled by the fragments of truth she pieced together from stolen letters and whispered confessions. She understood that to break this cycle of horror, she would need to confront not only Mother Catherine, but the powerful forces shielding her. But power is ruthless. The Church, an institution sworn to protect its own, moved swiftly to quash any threat. Fathers, bishops, even government officials were complicit, their hands stained with the blood of innocence, hidden behind layers of bureaucracy and holy decree. This was no ordinary scandal. It was a profound betrayal, a darkness festering at the heart of faith itself. And as Father Ryan's inquiries deepened, the danger extended beyond the convent's stone walls, reaching into the very corridors of power. You are standing at a crossroads. To ignore what you've learned is to remain shackled. To continue is to embrace a truth that will change you forever. If you feel the fire within, say it again with me. Light reveals shadows. Light reveals shadows. This is your transformation, your awakening. The next chapter will uncover the brutal consequences faced by those who dared to resist. Brace yourself. After Sister Mary's secret plea for help, the fragile veil protecting St. Mary's began to tear. Father Ryan, armed with the urgency of her message and growing suspicions, returned to the convent under the guise of his financial inspection. But beneath the surface of ledgers and donation records, he sought the truth buried deep in hidden rooms and whispered rumors. His presence was met with quiet hostility. Mother Catherine's cold gaze followed him, like a predator watching prey. Every question he asked was met with carefully rehearsed answers, or dismissive silence. Yet, Father Ryan's resolve hardened. He knew that within the convent's stone walls, something monstrous was being concealed, something that defied all the sacred vows and promises of sanctuary. One night, guided by whispered directions from a frightened sister, Father Ryan found himself in the convent's forbidden north wing, a place sealed off from public eyes for decades. The air was thick with decay and dread. The flicker of his candle cast grotesque shadows that danced on the cracked walls, revealing scars of violence hidden beneath peeling paint. There he uncovered chilling evidence, bloodstains erased in haste, crude shackles embedded in the stone floor, and hastily concealed documents that told a story of cruelty disguised as piety. The missing nuns were not merely called away. They were prisoners, kept for a sinister purpose. The darkest truth emerged. The convent had become a center for trafficking, selling young women to powerful men under the protection of the Church's hierarchy. The missing nuns had vanished into a world of horror no one dared speak of. But Father Ryan's discovery came at a cost. That very night, he was confronted by Mother Catherine herself, her voice icy and commanding, her eyes void of mercy. She warned him that some secrets are meant to stay buried, and that Defiance would it'd be met with ruin. "You tread on holy ground with unholy intentions," she hissed. "This house will protect itself, no matter the cost." The threat was clear. The battle was no longer spiritual. It was survival. Father Ryan faced a choice: retreat and preserve his life, or fight and expose the conspiracy at the risk of everything. Now you stand where few have dared. You know the price of silence. You've seen how power corrupts even the sacred. The truth is a weapon, and once wielded, there is no going back. Speak with me again, louder this time. Light reveals shadows. Light reveals shadows. You've sealed your fate. The next descent awaits. The night after his confrontation with Mother Catherine, Father Ryan found himself trapped in a tightening web of fear and deceit. The convent's walls seemed to close in around him, whispers following his every step. His every move was watched by eyes unseen, agents of a corrupt order determined to keep their sins secret. Despite the danger, Father Ryan refused to relent. He secretly met with the remaining nuns, those who dared to whisper of the horrors unfolding. Their voices trembled as they revealed the truth behind the disappearances, how the convent was no sanctuary but a prison, how their prayers masked a sinister machinery of abuse and control. These women had been silenced by threats, isolation, and a system designed to crush resistance. Mother Catherine's punishments escalated, twisting faith into fear, love into loyalty, demanded through suffering. Father Ryan began to collect testimonies and evidence, risking everything to send a report to higher church authorities. But the rot ran deeper than he imagined. His appeals were dismissed, his warnings labeled heresy. The institution he served was complicit, choosing reputation over justice. Faced with betrayal at every turn, Father Ryan realized he was alone. To save the survivors, he would need to expose the truth publicly, a dangerous gamble that could destroy him. And yet even now, as shadows lengthen and enemies close in, a spark of hope remains. The surviving nuns, emboldened by his courage, began to resist, quietly breaking the chains of silence. You have come far, but the journey is not over. To confront this darkness is to stare into the abyss of humanity itself. It demands strength few possess. Repeat with me once more, to bind your spirit to this fight. Light reveals shadows. Light reveals shadows. Hold fast. The final truths are close, and with them, the reckoning. The final months at St. Mary's were a descent into madness, masked as piety. The convent's facade of holiness crumbled behind locked doors, where power was wielded like a weapon. Mother Catherine's grip tightened, her once commanding presence warped into something monstrous. The surviving nuns spoke in hushed tones of secret rooms hidden beneath the chapel, places where screams echoed in the dead of night, silenced only by cold stone walls. Father Ryan's efforts to bring outside eyes to the convent fell on deaf ears. The church, terrified of scandal, buried every inquiry under layers of bureaucracy and silence. Letters vanished. Investigations were thwarted. He was warned to abandon the cause or face ruin. But the knowledge he held was a torch in the dark, and he refused to let it die. One bitter winter evening, as snow piled against the convent walls, the last 3 nuns vanished. No announcements, no explanations, just empty beds and broken prayers. The community outside whispered of curses and divine retribution, but no one dared speak the truth. The convent had become a tomb. Years later, renovations uncovered sealed-off chambers beneath the convent, evidence of rituals, secret passages, and records of atrocities that confirmed the darkest suspicions. The Church moved quickly to destroy these discoveries, yet some documents survived, hidden in forgotten archives, waiting for the day their story would be told. Now you know what they hoped would remain buried forever. This was not just a convent. It was a house of horrors, dressed in faith, a monument to corruption that devoured innocence behind its sacred walls. You stand at the edge of forbidden knowledge. Remember this truth. The greatest darkness hides beneath the guise of light. To awaken is to carry the burden of that truth with unflinching courage. Tomorrow's world will be shaped by those who dare to confront what others deny. Prepare yourself. The final revelation awaits. The echoes of St. Mary's Convent haunt more than just forgotten archives. They resonate in the shadows of institutions built on trust, faith, and power. The story of those vanished nuns is not an isolated relic of the past, but a warning etched into history's hidden pages. It reveals how systems meant to protect can become prisons that silence and consume. Behind every whispered denial lies a deeper, darker truth. A network of complicity, fear, and control that stretches far beyond Wisconsin's cold forests. The very structures of authority, religious, political, social, can conceal corruption so profound it threatens the soul of any who dare look too closely. You have been drawn into this labyrinth, a place where sacred and sinister merge. What you've learned is dangerous knowledge, not meant for the faint-hearted. It demands vigilance, courage, and relentless questioning of what you are told. The nuns who disappeared from St. Mary's are more than victims. They are symbols. Symbols of what happens when power goes unchecked, when silence becomes a weapon, and when truth is buried beneath layers of fear. As you carry this knowledge forward, remember, real freedom begins when you refuse to be blind to what lies beneath the surface. The darkest secrets are never truly gone. They wait, always, for someone to shine a light. Now, as you step back from the abyss, commit this phrase to your mind and heart. Light reveals the hidden, and truth shatters the silence. Repeat it twice. Say it with conviction. Let it mark you. You are no longer a passive witness, but a seeker of truth, armed with the clarity to see beyond illusions. This story may have ended, but your journey has just begun. Stay vigilant, stay hungry for the truth, and never forget, the shadows are always watching.